Today on the Quest podcast, ufologist and cryptozoologist Brit Barbieri. Life is a quest for logic and reason. It is a quest to find balance between science and faith. Life is a quest for knowledge and understanding. But most importantly, it's a quest for personal discovery. Whatever your quest, knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. Welcome to Quest. Hi everyone, I'm your host, Todd Fischer, and welcome to Season 3 of Quest. A quest is a search for something, and this podcast will show you how we know what we know through interviews with people that have incredible stories of dedication and perseverance. To me, curiosity is part of what makes us human, and there's still so much we don't know. There's joy in discovery. It's what drives us. It's our quest. Hi, Britt. Welcome to the Quest podcast.
Hi, Todd. Thank you so much for having me on tonight.
Yeah, this is fun. I've been looking forward to this. We've been trying to get this scheduled for a while, and just something keeps always fumbling with our schedules.
It's terrible. I know. It's like we have been playing like almost like a game of tag. It seems like trying to get up and going, which I'm glad I'm finally here. It's exciting.
We do work together. So for those that follow me, know that I produce a podcast that you're in called No Earthly Explanation. That's co-hosted by you and Don Schmidt, our great friend, UFO expert,
troublemaker.
Yeah, which is great. Don's an old friend of mine. He's been a guest of the show before, but I've already had Don on this season, so I thought, well, what a great way to get to know you more. Introduce you to my listeners, and you could still talk about a podcast I produce.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, which you're doing. I'm so glad that I met you through Dawn, because honestly, it's been wonderful, and I've thoroughly enjoyed doing the podcast and joining along on the adventures, of course, with Don, because he's just crazy. I mean, he's the king of Roswell. So
for sure, yeah. And No Earthly Explanation has actually done very well. Like, our listenership is really high. It's really taken off. I'm really surprised by it. So I'm happy that people are listening. But you actually do things that's not really in my worldview of things I've experienced and worked on. So you call yourself a ufologist and a cryptozoologist. So define what you do for people that are listening that might not know what that is.
So for ufology, as a ufologist, it's the study of UFOs, and now it would be considered UAPs, and the history of them and the cover-ups that have followed over the years. It also includes a lot more in-depth levels of alien contact, which would be the stages of contact that, for those of you who don't know, J. Allen Hynek invented. So you can actually look up the close encounter contacts that he basically created to go through all that and through the history of it. So ufology is quite great, especially right now with everything going on basically in the world in regards to UFOs and UAP, with the disclosures coming in and out all the time. And then as far as cryptozoology, that's the fun one, because that is basically about creatures or animals that science does not believe exists and kind of just poo-poos on, in the sense that they are mythological and nothing more than that. So I study that and have studied that since I was very, 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 very young. I actually got into cryptozoology when I was like 6 or 7, because I grew up in the Rocky Mountains of Colorado, and I had a kind of like a really weird encounter, or like I would say a Bigfoot experience. And so ever since then, I just set out on my journey.
Wow. And I was going to ask when you got into this kind of stuff. So, but let's go back a little bit. So tell me how you grew up. Did you grow up with a big family? Did you grow up spiritual or religious? Tell me about that part of your life.
Yep, I was the youngest of 7, and we grew up in the Rocky Mountains of Estes Park, Colorado. We did grow up on the more religious. We were Catholic Christian, but we were all Catholic, all baptized. we went to church and did our normal things, but we weren't crazy about it. We more believed that, your relationship with God was between you and God and nobody needed to worry about it kind of thing. But it taught like the moral code and stuff like that in us, and the moral and the honor and loyalty and things like that, which was really good and really important, and family. So when I got into this and always had more of a drive to it came from my Irish culture, my Irish background, believe it or not, because of the folklore and stuff that was passed down from my grandparents and my great grandparents from Ireland and stuff, and Germany. So that all kind of just resonated, I think, within me. And then, things start happening when you're really young and you start questioning things and you want to know more. And so I set out on that journey to figure out what it was.
I've been to Estes Park, Colorado, and that's the Stanley Hotel for people that aren't familiar with that part of Colorado. That's where Stephen King was staying when he wrote The Shining. That's the whole lore behind that. So it's interesting to me. So there was someone who told me, once a geologist told me, that whole area is on one giant piece of slate. Where the hotel is, all the way down to where that like little power grid is. It's all on a giant, and that might be a reason why there's so much paranormal activity there. Is there truth to that?
Yeah. Anytime that you're dealing with any type of material like that, that's why like limestone or quartz crystals become a big mystery in that. That's why like Gettysburg, for instance, is a huge paranormal hotspot topic, because if you actually took all the quartz crystals underneath the ground of Gettysburg, you could build a building with it. So imagine energizing that. It's like playing a movie over and over again, because a lot of people don't realize that quartz crystals are in everything that records, such as time, like watches, your computers, your phones, even. I mean, all these things, your camcorders, your cameras, all of that has these quartz crystals because it holds memory and it records. So all these things I do believe hold a lot of credibility to why things happen in certain areas. I think sometimes it's magnitude, like it's magnified, in certain areas versus others because of this. Yeah.
Interesting. So when you had your experience when you were little, you were there in the Rockies. Did you have a Bigfoot experience? Is that what it was?
I did. Yeah. I actually had a ghostly experience first when I was like 4.5, 5, almost 5. And then I was 8, just turning 8 years old, when we had a lot of exotic animals. We had llamas, we had horses, we had a lot of exotics. And my dad used to travel for work, and my mom and I were out taking care of the animals one night. And we've heard, growing up in the Rockies, you hear all different types of animals. And for people that don't know, when a deer dies, it sounds like a woman being murdered. It's awful. It's absolutely terrible. And so you hear all these different sounds growing up, and bobcats and mountain lions and bears and everything else. But that night, something was across the property from us and our neighbor's property, and it wanted us to know it was there. And it let out this horrible sound that literally caused me to drop the grain bucket, leave my mom in the barn, and run in the house. Which I look back and I feel terrible. It's the big joke that we talk about today, because this is my study. I go in the forest now looking for this thing. But yeah. And then we heard, what sounded like something taking off, very large, taking off away from us, when we spooked and the llamas set off their warning. And then I asked my dad and my brother, and they finally came forward and said, yeah, when we were up, at the back of the house, on the back of the property, there was something up there watching us. And what it was definitely not a bear.
Interesting.
Yeah. So, I mean, kind of just kept happening.
Bigfoot exists as folklore in many states. Folklore is probably a word you hate that I'm saying. We'll call it folklore for the sake of the Quest podcast. But does the Bigfoot mythology exist in other countries too, or is it just an American thing?
No, it's all over the globe. It almost seems like every single continent or country has a story that is very similar to Bigfoot, Sasquatch, and they have different names. I mean, even Australia has one. When they talk about it in certain other areas, there's like the wild man, or the little apes, or things. I mean, they have different types of styles and things like that. But there's even literature and things dating back to Leif Erikson talking about coming over and running into these things and being extremely intimidated by them. And it's an interesting thing. Europe is full of, I mean, Europe has a lot of other things too, like werewolf and things like that, but they do talk about Bigfoot and they do talk about Sasquatch. And it's hard for me to sit there and say, oh, it's just made up because it's only here in America. But then when you actually start digging into the history and other cultures and tapestries and history books and all these different articles start coming out, you start finding out that there's more stories of these creatures that have been around for centuries, not just in pop culture or in the 60s in the United States.
Yeah. Yeah. So Bigfoot's one of the only, I'm pretty open-minded with stuff, but Bigfoot's one of those things I just haven't been able to get behind it yet. Right. I'm waiting. There's too much science I'm looking for, because we haven't gotten a body. We haven't gotten any DNA. Nope. We've gotten no skin, no hair. Like, I got to get something. But
there are hair.
I need something. There's
hair samples out there, Todd. It's just science will not recognize them.
If there's hair samples, we have DNA, and DNA would prove something. So whoever has the hair needs to take it to a lab where the DNA can be looked at. And then we can disprove whether it's really the hair or not. Because if you're just hanging on to hair and you won't let it into the hands of science, you have nothing. It's not credible.
That's true.
So that's why I have to look at it. I want to believe that, just like I want to believe aliens and the mathematical probability that has to happen. And, I'm a huge supporter of what goes on at Roswell and Don's work. And I want to believe that that bodies were recovered, but we've still not seen those. And that's one of the things, is that we're in this fact-based society. But, if people that have read my book know that I do talk about ghosts, which I call roaming souls in my book. I don't like to term ghost or spirit necessarily. And I put science behind it, why it exists. I also use comparative religious study to discuss what ghosts are through, any number of 4,400 known religions and mythologies. So I'm always looking, but dragons, unicorns, Bigfoot. Right now I have to put them all over on one side, Britt.
I get it. I get it.
My company does have a book coming out about the fairy faith. So
see.
So I'm wide open to publishing your book when we have the proper findings.
I will keep that in mind.
Definitely.
I'll come to you for all of that.
I want to publish your book on Bigfoot when we have some science to support it. So let's move over to UFOs for a second. So you were on episode 3 of Unidentified with Demi Lovato. Tell me about how this came about and this experience, what this was like.
It was really quite fascinating, because they wanted people from different elements of research. And so my friend is Ben Hansen, and we had been talking, and he knew a couple of people there and recommended me specifically for that as a ufologist. And so they had called me up, and I had a conversation, and then one thing led to the next. They absolutely wanted me to handle this situation because I studied Catalina Island and the research that has taken place and has happened over the years on Catalina Island. It was kind of like my own personal passion project that I started researching that island because of others before me that had done extensive research. And it's a rabbit hole, I will warn you, because it's truly a mysterious island, like Jules Verne style, that it's out there and it has everything you could possibly want. And so when I got there and got the chance to meet with Demi and her sister Dallas and their friend Matthew Scott, it was quite fascinating because they honestly didn't want to research anything about the island. They wanted me to tell them everything, as if it was like they were coming into a class without knowing anything and I was their teacher, which was wonderful because their reactions were genuine and they really wanted to know. And I love that when people want to think outside of the box and just put it all on the table, and we'll go through everything together. And, basically we got the opportunity to do a night watch on the water, which was rare. And then I got to go scuba diving for USO activity for unidentified submerged objects, which was absolutely extraordinary, something I wanted to do, and found some interesting things down there and some noises that I can't explain.
I watched that episode and I was really impressed with how you were in that, because, you're definitely letting them know everything about what went on there. And then here you are, scuba diving. And I think it was was it Demi? Like, did she get seasick? Was that her thing? Was she couldn't go in the water or couldn't go in the boat because she would get seasick, and they were trying to like teach her to maybe how to snorkel from the shore?
Yeah, she said that she was more comfortable snorkeling than getting into the boat, basically because of being seasick. So Dallas went out with me, which was fun because Dallas was all for it, and they're all great, and Dallas was just wonderful. I love her to pieces. And so they went out scuba diving, and the water, I'm going to be honest, it was a very rough day. We were the only boat that went out that day to even shoot this. And I felt really bad for Matthew and Demi because that water was choppy to have to scuba dive in. And of course, we saw how that unfolded for them, which was terrible. It was just awful.
What was Demi Lovato like?
Oh, she was great. She was so relaxed and like really wanting to know everything that she possibly could. And she was fun. I mean, she was really fun and very energetic. And I mean, she was smiling every time I saw her. And every time we spoke, she was just so uplifting. And truly, I really believe she has a real passion for it. And I think that's great. I mean, I truly think that's great.
I'm drawing a blank on what you referred to now. So I've been to Catalina Island before, but in all honesty, just to tour the celebrity homes.
Oh, okay.
Okay. To do the touristy things that were there.
Okay.
But what was the phenomena that was mentioned in the show? Was it like was it the green doors, or what was it called that would appear on at different parts of the island? But you know what I'm talking about?
Portals.
The portals. Tell me about the
portals.
Because I didn't really get much of what this was. I had never heard of this before. What is this that was mentioned?
Along my research, I had started reading, and there was a gentleman who wrote a book, and in his book, he had mentioned the green door, about a portal that opened up on the island. And I thought, well, that's really weird. I want to know about this. And so my research took me on a rabbit hole. And even when I got to the island, I was talking to a couple of locals. I was like, is there any truth to this portal story or the green door story? And when I lived in California, we used to go over to do scuba diving on that island because it's known for great diving. And I used to just mingle and talk to people, especially at the museum. And they would say, yeah, there's portals all over the island. And there's legends, like my grandfather used to talk about this green door that would open up. And I thought, what? Like, what does it look like? And so there was stories in a book about that. It looked like a green triangle almost with like a rounded top. And these girls wanted to go in, but the one girl decided not to go in because it was so dark and she felt empty. Like if she went in, she'd be lost forever. And so my studies of portals, kind of matching them together, I was like, well, with all the activity going on, and if there is USO activity and people are seeing portals on the island, perhaps those are the wormholes that are opening up, and people are getting glimpses of them. And honestly, you would feel alone or lost or a giant void if you walk through there because you don't know where you're going. It's just a dark hole, per se. So yeah, I mean, I've never seen it, so I can't tell you.
Yeah, I've never heard of it before, so I was curious what that was. So you have this fascinating new podcast that you do with Don Schmidt,
yes,
called No Earthly Explanation. Talk about Don for a minute. Tell me how you came to work with Don.
So in a nutshell, I was working on a project that I was building myself for dealing with paranormal and UFO Bigfoot connection, believe it or not. I know, don't laugh. And I had followed Don's work for a long time because I was obsessed with J. Allen Hynek. And so I just thought, you know what, I'm going to take a chance. This was many years back, and I'm going to reach out to him directly and see if he'd want to be a part of this project that I'm trying to create. And so sure enough, he emailed me back. We started talking, and then we had our first Zoom call and we clicked. And then after that, it was like, I'm going to stick around with this guy, and then he became family. There's nothing I wouldn't do to look out for him or protect him. And I love that man. So we've just been friends ever since.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he really kind of maybe train you up on being a ufologist more than anyone, would you say?
Oh, absolutely. He is by far my mentor. And when we first met, I had started to tell him my my own research and my own, how I started into looking into UFOs. And I told him I wanted to do more, and that I heard about ufology and ufologists out there, and I wanted to be that. And we sat down and we talked, and he started helping me and telling me what books to get. And then I found a couple of resources online that were teaching ufology courses that were you could get certified in. Is that you did your hours and you did your time and your research. And so I sent them over to him. I said, "Are these legit?" And he's like, "Yeah, they're through universities. There's the one, the UK is the one I went through." And he picked the right one for me, and then he helped me through them. I mean, it was hard studying, but I did it. And man, I'm glad I did. And then I owed it all to him. And every time I talk to him, and I've told him this since day one, it's almost humbling for me, because I feel like I am literally talking and hanging out with J. Allen Hynek. And for me, being a little girl, being obsessed with him from like Close Encounters and seeing him in the movie with his pipe, I'm like, that's really him. Like, oh my God. Like, so for me, which, it's fascinating, because I'll talk to people and they're like, who is that? Who are you talking about? Are you talking about Spielberg? I'm like, no, oh my God, just forget it. But then to have met Don and get that opportunity, and now fast forward to today, where we have this amazing podcast together, and we're tackling so much of this, these disclosures and cover-ups and conspiracies, and in all different spectrums of the paranormal, including ufology. It's humbling. It's absolutely humbling.
Yeah, it's been fun so far. We have a lot of good stuff coming up soon to do. So a lot of fun episodes coming up for sure. So let me ask you one more thing as we kind of go out on the show today. Do you have a favorite part of what you do? Do you particularly like ghost hunting more than maybe Bigfoot hunting or UFO hunting? Like do you have a favorite thing? What do you like the most?
Oh, that's tough, Todd.
Like picking your favorite child, right?
Oh, yeah, it really is. It really is. God, that's tough. I'm known as the Bigfoot girl. I have a giant 8-foot Bigfoot in my front yard that my father made for me. Everything I have is Bigfoot. But I do feel that I am drawn and driven to the UFO and ufology world, because I do believe in it so much. And I do believe that there is life on other planets. And I do think we're being visited. And I truly believe these other accounts. I would have to say that, paranormal investigating with ghosts and everything is wonderful, and I enjoy it. That's still a wonderful hobby and passion of mine as well. But to categorize it would be very hard. But because Bigfoot and UFOs would be neck and neck for me, very, very much neck and neck.
Do you find any opposition to your work being a female conducting research like this, since it seems to have pretty much always been a male-dominated business?
Yeah. I mean, I do feel at times it's really annoying if I try and just put in like, hey, can I throw this into the mix? It's like, oh, here we go. This woman just wants to have her voice heard, and it's like, no, it's because I've studied it. Like, and I just want to throw out this theory or this idea. And I think now it's a little bit easier. Whereas before it was a very strong male dominating field in all aspects, in paranormal, in ghost hunting, in cryptids and all of that. It was always very male driven. And when you meet a woman, you're like, oh,
yeah.
hey.
Well, I mean, that's evident from almost any show that you see on TV, whether it's Josh Gates or it's the Ghost Hunters or whatever the show might be. It seems like everything is male in this type of world of investigation. You seldom see a female show up in this. So that's why I liked having you as part of this project. It's a different type of voice. And
I appreciate it.
You're a good companion to Don on the show. And I often wonder, is there another Don Schmidt after Don is gone? Because,
no.
It might be the kind of the end of the line with a type of investigator like him. I don't know who else is out there, because I know there's a lot of, pretty TV people that do this for their entertainment career. And
right.
That's really all it is. There's never really any hard investigation and hard research. Just a lot of speculation and stuff that's good for TV is what you see.
And unfortunately, though, you're right, because that's what we're up against constantly, because now the drive for people to want to be on TV, there's not a lot of people that are truly passionate about it. They're only passionate about it to be on TV. And that's the tough part. And, you know, Don is he's just a rare, genuine, amazing individual who has such passion and drive and believes in it so much that he has stuck forward and gotten his boots so dirty that they're caked with history. And I honestly, I admire it. I am driven by it. I tell my kids about his work. I share it with my son because it's people like that I want my kids to look up to. And it's going to be very sad.
Yeah. One of the things I always enjoyed about watching with Don, it was simply how he could work with a witness, work with someone who wanted to come forward, because he was always very good natured. He developed a rapport with people. And I think someone who really wants to tell something that they don't know if they'll be looked at as crazy or if they're,
right.
Yeah, I think you have to have a certain level of compassion there. And also I think those people can sniff out the profiteers, the people that just want their story for the sake of themselves or money,
Absolutely.
I think he has a great way in which he's handled himself with witnesses through the years, and why he's continuously told the best stories and has the most books and has the best information. But yeah, so this has been the Don Schmidt Hour.
Yeah.
Well, Don, if you're listening,
he's wonderful.
All these great things we've said about you in this episode. But Britt, I appreciate you being on the show and telling me all about, your work so far. And tell everyone, how can people find you out there on the interwebs?
Yeah, you guys can look me up on Instagram at Brit what is that? Is it underscore, right? Yeah. Sorry, folks. I'm still learning all these little pieces and parts. So it's at Brit _investigates on Instagram. I now am on TikTok as well. I just started that. You can find me on Facebook as Brit Barbieri Official. I have 2 pages on there as well. You can also come listen to us babble about Don or with Don at No Earthly Explanation. And that's on Instagram. That's on Facebook. That's on Anchor. That's on Spotify. That's on all those places. You can email us there at noearthlyexplanation@gmail.com. But personally, you can reach out to me at Brit _investigates on Instagram. That's probably my most active page.
Perfect. Well, I do hope you come back to the Quest podcast again. I think on the next season, we'll have both you and Don on the show. And certainly when you get that Bigfoot proof, come back and we'll talk about that.
On any of my proof, I plan on coming back because I investigate so much. And if I ever find proof of giants, Todd, I'm coming back on here because I do giant studies too.
I don't doubt there were giants. I think they fit. My expertise falls a little bit more into kind of a biblical history and comparative religious study. And there's a lot of stuff, a lot of really interesting Old Testament stuff that went on. And I always find it interesting what we come across, because just take a read at the Bible and see some of the fascinating creatures and things that happened, and tell me you can't have a belief in the paranormal, because you have to.
Exactly.
I mean, kind of the entire story of Jesus kind of, all leads you there at the end, right?
Exactly. So, I agree with you 100%. 100%.
I kind of have, my own theory on aliens, though. There was a great book that came out called Angels and Aliens. And I kind of am starting to orbit a philosophy that we might be looking at the same thing. And I'm putting together a compelling story to kind of explain why that is, why sightings of UFOs and particularly of aliens is rare, and almost as rare as it was to see angels. So, and also angels had fairly superior technology of their day, as best as they could be explained in those days. So that's true. There might be a convergence of spirituality and extraterrestrial origin in a way.
Well, then you would get a kick out of there. I used to have debates, and I'll say it quickly because I used to say it just to make people just stop and think for a second. So we are terrestrial because we are land dwellers, we're of this earth. And I used to joke with people and I would say, Leah, listen, I'm Catholic. I'm not saying I don't believe in God. Like, hear me out. But Jesus and God were not from this planet. Therefore, they were extraterrestrial in nature. And their eyebrows would raise and look at me cockeyed like I was cuckoo. But it was all in fun. But in truth, just saying,
Well,
it wasn't from here.
You get UFO cults, you get UFO cults that think, and there's a whole lot of like the Urantia Foundation and a lot of these groups. I mean, there's many of them that have some crazy beliefs out there that, Adam and Eve might have been two genetically perfect people or clones of one another that were put on the planet, on a planet full of essentially maybe primates. Like there's a lot of theories about things like this. And that maybe we've just shaped it as, as religion these days. The Zecharia Sitchin novels, the 10th Planet series, if you're familiar with those, have almost become a religion of their own. And the idea, are you familiar with the 10th Planet series? Do you know what
Yes, but I haven't read them.
So what that is, just in short, Sitchin believed that there was a 10th planet and that it had an elliptical orbit that was so long that essentially just one revolution around the sun could take thousands of years, right? So a society developed for a really long time, became technologically advanced as it's rounded the sun just one time, right? Had this huge long, so they realized that what would happen is this really large elliptical orbit would go so far away from the sun that everyone would eventually just freeze to death. And that the people from that planet leapt over to potentially Mars and also to Earth. And that's the whole idea of it. And that at some point, this 10th planet will swing back in close enough to where we'll see it again. And we'll have a planet pass by us that will have all of this superior, have civilization will have lived on it. So
wow.
Really, and it actually holds up for science purposes. Like there really could be a planet that's so far out there, we really just haven't been able to see it yet. So imagine, where it takes us 365 days to go around the sun. This might take thousands of years. So such a long path that we would have never actually seen it since we've been living on the planet, but that we might have been seeded from that civilization. So it's stuff like this.
That's fascinating.
It's a lot of these people, they're new thought leaders in a way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm always interested in a new version of something like this and to hear about it, because sometimes there's a nugget of something really good in there. And it would be very
fascinating
if this planet swung back by us, this planet X or 10th planet or whatever you want to call it. And here on it is these great civilizations that have been frozen for thousands of years. I mean, how much would that just blow your mind, right? And like change their perspective of everything. So
yeah,
I'm all about
that. Would put me back to the beginning of the drawing board for me. I'd be like, well,
start rethinking everything, So
everything.
It's crazy. And that we do more and more in Mars. Who knows? Maybe we're going to find something there. I think we will. Tend to think we get closer and closer all the time to discovering something there, because just a year ago we weren't sure if there was water, and now they're finding it. So
I think we'll be surprised what we find on Mars. I think they're gonna might be welcomed when they get there.
Right. Well, Britt, thanks for coming out tonight, and we'll talk to you soon. Okay.
Sounds good. Thanks for having me on.
Good night. And there you have it, my interview with Brit Barbieri. I hope you enjoyed it. This completes season 3 of the Quest podcast. I hope you enjoyed this season. I may have some sporadic episodes through the summer, but I won't be back until the fall with season 4. If you liked what Brit had to say today, be sure you check out No Earthly Explanation, which is a podcast that I produce and stars Brit and Don Schmidt. I think you'll really enjoy some of their topics. So until next season, take care. Thanks for listening. Until next time. Thank you for listening to this podcast. Please be sure to rate and review this episode.
This podcast is produced by Todd Fischer and distributed by Metacortex Publishing. This podcast is copyright. Any previously trademarked or copyright content is used by permission. Information and opinions stated in this podcast should not be construed as medical advice. Please be sure to visit the official website for the International Association of Metatomics at metatomics.org or find us on social media for other unique content.